Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tom's Hardware Show. I'm Sharon Harding. It is September 3rd, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are kicking things off live. Yes, we are live, everyone. So that means we are taking questions from our viewers. If you have anything to ask on today's topics to our guests, please send them over via the chat on YouTube or Facebook. We'll be answering questions on the air by the end of the show. So joining us today are a couple great guests. First, we have Tom's Hardware Deputy Managing Editor, Paul Alcorn. What's going on, Paul?
Not much. A busy week.
Yeah. So, Paul, we are about to, as we can see below us, we're about to get into some 10900K overclocking very shortly. But I know you recently covered a different Intel CPU that's cheaper than the 10900K, but offers similar performance.
That's right. It's the 10850K. Another one of Intel's great product names there. It's essentially the same. It's the exact same thing as the 10900K, except they bend it to be 100 megahertz slower on both the boost and the base clocks. But the sample that they sent us, we achieved similar overclocking with it as we've seen to the 10900K. It's also it's also unlocked, being a K model. And it's $30, anywhere from $30 to $50 cheaper at retail. So really, I mean, it's a great deal. I mean, in a lot of ways, it feels like a price cut on the 10900K, but just as it comes as a new product. But they're so similar, it's essentially the same thing, especially if you're overclocking. It's very close. So there wasn't a whole lot to see there in the testing. It's the same thing. At least it feels like it. There's a slight edge to the 10900K, but I mean it's going to be imperceptible to most normal people. I mean, even performance addicts aren't going to notice half a frame per second on a game.
So can you get that chip now? Can you buy it?
Yes, you can. Yes, and it is available. That was a big problem with the 10900K is a lack of availability has led to a lot of price gouging. So even though officially the chip is only about $35, the 10850K is only $30 cheaper than the 10900K. The 10900K has been price gouged like crazy. It's hard to get, especially in other countries. But even here in the United States, there are a lot of availability problems. So that's another good thing about the 10850K. You can actually buy it. Hopefully, we'll see. I guess it'll just depend upon demand and how many of them Intel's punching out.
Very cool. Thanks, Paul. Well, I know somebody who has a 10900K, and he is with us today as our special guest. We have Max joining us, also known as Hardware Numb3rs. What's going on, Max?
Hi. Well, tonight we have a bit of an interesting show since we have with us the Dragon. Well, my subscriber already knows it. And well, we have the 10900K that I'm going to take down to 190 degrees, minus 190 degrees. And we are going to 7 gigahertz and play a bit of World of Warcraft for 5 minutes, just to show you how is a gameplay at 7 gigahertz. So now I'm feeding the Dragon.
Awesome.
I'm going to show you everything. So we are now sitting at 6 gigahertz and negative 150 degrees. So now I'm bringing down the temperature to be able to reach that 7 gigahertz. So as you can see, the Dragon is well fed. There's a lot of smoke. Like it's fresh actually, and in summer it's quite nice. We're approaching negative 180. After we reach the minimum temperature, I'm going to overclock more the CPU since it's already overclocked. And we can reach that big number, the 7 gigahertz. So now we are approaching the minimum temperature we can. As you can see, I'm filling the pot full of liquid nitrogen. And we are at negative 191 degrees. So pretty cool. Now with the software, I'm going to raise the voltage up to 1.67 or 1.77, which is something that people doesn't want to do that at home, since I'm using special cooling, and you can do that even with a big water cooling. So you're going to fry your PC. So don't do that at all. And as you can see, I'm like 6.5 gigahertz, and now I'm going to reach 7. The magic number, 7 gigahertz. So,
do we know what the record is?
well, this is a good CPU, but I think the record is like 7.6, something like that. So, well, very extreme competitive benching. This is a good CPU, but the maximum I get was 7.2 for some single-threaded benchmarks. Is a good one, but I'm not that competitive with this chip. So I'm going to find other chip and try to test how far I can go, and hopefully to make my way into my top 10, into the top 10 of this CPU. But it's something that takes a lot of time, and you have to find the right chip. So, right, step by step. The thing about the extreme overclocking is to have a lot of patience and time as well. So,
And have you gone through some 10900Ks already?
yeah, I've tried 2. One was very bad for the luck, and this one can do 5.5 with a custom loop, so water cooling, and this is pretty good. 5.3 with IDX, and the other one was like 5.1, 5.2. So there was a big difference. So overclock is not guaranteed. So you have to find the right chip to do competition. And the thing about extreme overclocking and competitive extreme overclocking is really to look for the right chip to be able to push the record. So it's very hard, expensive, and time consuming. But it's a sport. It's like the Formula One or MotoGP and stuff like that. So guys, you can see now gameplay at 7 gigahertz. I don't know if anybody have played World of Warcraft at 7 gigahertz before. I don't think so.
Have you, Paul?
No, not at 7 gigahertz. Definitely not.
The good thing about this this particular area where I'm at now is that usually with a good chip and water cooling, you're like at 100 FPS, 105. Now I can push even at 144. So it's very strange to see that kind of FPS. Since this CPU, this game is very CPU limited. As you can see, I have a 2080 Ti, I'm at 1080p, and I'm sitting at 60% of GPU usage, and we have one core at most at 100%. So this is an old game, and okay, it crashed now. So you know what? Because I forgot to recharge liquid nitrogen. Well,
the dragon gets hungry.
Yeah, the dragon gets hungry. So, but I think at this point I can let rest a bit, so we can move to other topic if you want. Since,
so what was the frame rate you hit?
140 or something like this.
140. What do you think, Paul?
Well, it's going to do better than you can do on water cooling, that's for sure. So.
Yeah, so we actually have a question from one of our viewers asking, this is from Sergeant Lee 86, asking if you think they could hit 5.3 gigahertz on the 10900K on all cores with custom water cooling with 2 radiators.
Well, it's about silicon luck. This particular chip, this is a very lucky one, can hit 5.5 with leaking cooling. So, but this is it's difficult to find chip like this. Usually, I think 5.1, 5.2 is something that can be achievable with an average chip. But as I told you, I found this very lucky one. Another one that I tested was 5.1 with a very big water cooling setup. So it's just about luck. So it's nothing guaranteed that you have to, the lottery, you have to win the silicon lottery to be able to do 5.3. But the good thing about Intel is that even if you are like 5.1 or 5.3, there's not much of a difference. So it's more important to have a good tuning on the memories, because memories matters a lot more than 100 megahertz of the CPU. So that's something that I keep telling the guys that follow me, or they asking me for advice. So they always push the CPU to the limit as well with the Ryzen, but the most important part is the memory, something that is like long forgotten since when we start overclocking many years ago, the focus was on the memory, since it's one of the main bottleneck. As the Dragon needs to be fed, the CPU needs to be fed by the memory.
Which actually brings us to another question. Somebody asked if, well, they pointed to Corsair RAM running at 5,000 megahertz, if that would help them reach 5.3 on all cores. I'm guessing yes, right? That's pretty good RAM.
Well, it's a pretty good RAM, yes, but I think you have to find the middle ground. So for the 10th generation Intel, it's good to have a good memory kit, but not to exaggerate. Since if you had to spend like $3,000 for a memory kit, it's not really worth it. You can find a good one for like half the price. And if you are sitting at 4.4, 4.5 gigahertz on the memory, you're pretty much at the diminishing return limits. So what I suggest is like a kit like the Viper Steel, 4400 megahertz. This is a nice kit and it's cheap. And that is one that I'm primarily suggesting for Intel. Since you can have both frequency and not empty your wallet.
Yeah, and dialing up your your fabric multiplier will help a lot there too.
Yeah, for Ryzen, yes.
Well, even for the 10900K,
Yes.
you can dial up the fabric, and I mean it runs a lot faster. You get pretty decent bump.
Yes. Usually, I always go as high as I can. Now I'm 5.3 gigahertz with 5 gigahertz ring. So
Yep.
this is a good setup. Actually.
That's good.
I'm using the Team Extreme now, the T-Force, the 3600 megahertz C14, but it's now overclocked to 4 gigahertz C16. This is another good kit of memory, and with Intel, it's performing quite well.
So do you always try to run a game or an application? Because some people just try to hit a certain number, right? But you are actually gaming.
Well, depends. There's a lot of, I do gaming for fun, because gaming with liquid nitrogen is very unpractical, so I cannot play World of Warcraft for 2 hours like this.
Right.
Costly, and I'm gonna crash at some time. So, regarding the benchmark, there's a lot of benchmarks, since there's like GPU benchmark, CPU benchmark, multi-core benchmark, single core benchmark. I have my 10 benchmark that I like it, a bit of both. So everybody, I think, every extreme overclocker specializes in some certain benchmark. So it's a matter of personal preference. I like Super PI 32, for example, Cinebench, the most common. The 3D marks for when I overclock the GPU. So like this GPU, I can overclock with liquid nitrogen, even this GPU. I'm going to try as well the new RTX when I can with liquid nitrogen. So going to do a bit of both. So
very cool. So we have a question about latency. They're specifically asking about a 4400 megahertz with 18 CL CAS timings. Would that be sufficient for 10900K overclocking? I think they're trying to hit 5.3 on
no, it's okay. Well, I mean, you have to separate the frequency of the CPU for the memory. It's something that is completely unrelated. Everything helps. So if you can find the maximum CPU frequency that you can run safely, it's important, safely under liquid cooling is a thing. And with Intel scale is pretty good, so it's fine. And then you have to find the maximum frequency and the lowest time you can for the memory. So that doesn't mean that you need 5 gigahertz memory to reach 5 gigahertz CPU.
Exactly.
But you have to push a bit of both, because if you can achieve 5.5 with an alien CPU, but you have like 2400 megahertz memory, you're creating a big bottleneck. So you have to find balance, like a big build with a cheap GPU.
I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, and some of that, depends, can vary how high you can overclock your memory. Like Max pointed out, how high you can overclock the chip and how high you can overclock the memory, they aren't really interrelated. But how high you can overclock the memory sometimes revolves around the quality of your IMC. It's the integrated memory controller on the chip. Some chips will clock really high on the cores, but the integrated memory controller is kind of no good, right? It's not that great. And sometimes you get the opposite, where you can really overclock memory on it. But
yeah, I had a chip that was very unlucky for the core, but was incredible for the IMC. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to use it for competition, because I can run memory at like 4.9 gigahertz, but the CPU was kind of bad. So in this case, I found a good way. I can run almost at 5 gigahertz, the memory at C14, so very extreme. This is a good chip because it can do both. Run games at 7 gigahertz, and I can run almost 5 gigahertz C14 on the memory, so you have a good IMC.
That's a good tip.
Is a big difference between Gen 9. So people say Gen 9 is another plus, but it is not, because they made a lot of changes. and especially in gaming. We have a better IMC. There's a lot of improvement, like I think it's the security patches, because the 1% lows, the minimum frame rate in games, the 10 gens absolutely is much better than the Gen 9. So this is something that maybe some people was wondering, if I have a Gen 9 to upgrade to a Gen 10. For some game like World of Warcraft, it's worth. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration when you talk about CPU, GPU, memory, and stuff.
Max, can you talk a little bit about the Dragon for some of our viewers who haven't checked out the Ice Dragon before? Can you just talk a little bit about, how you made it and how he's helping you out?
Yes, the Dragon, did came from one of my ideas. Since I'm doing extreme overclocking, I need a fan here, so I have to take the vapor of liquid nitrogen away. So I have always a big fan here pushing air. And then, when I saw a lot of vapor of liquid nitrogen coming out of the fan, I said, wow, maybe I can do something about that to make it a bit more fun. And then I contacted a friend, a teammate, you can check it out, Italian Extreme Modders, group of modders, and explained my idea, and he was so kind to realize me that in 3D printer, and then he did everything manually with the airbrusher and the 3D printer. He did everything, so it helped me realize this idea that I got, and apparently it's a good one, since now when I'm doing a show is on that side, but when I'm doing overclocking, I go like over there, and the Dragon is facing me, so he's adding fun to something that was already fun. So I really love the Dragon, because you have to have fun sometimes, even for long session, because sometimes extreme overclocking takes 3-4 hours or 5 even. And if you have some good-looking things, breathing liquid nitrogen is more fun.
I definitely agree. I definitely love staring at that Dragon, so I think it's working. So this week one of the things we saw this week, it's been a really busy week, hasn't it? But one of the things we saw was the launch of Intel's first 11th gen core CPUs in the form of a mobile chips codenamed Tiger Lake. So Paul is our CPU king around here. Can you give us a rundown on Intel's latest leak?
Well, the Tiger Lake, comes to market to battle AMD's Ryzen 4000 series chips. Now, AMD has made a lot of progress there, but Tiger Lake is impressive, at least, what we've seen of it so far. And there's no real reason to believe that most of the benchmarks that Intel has shared are going to be at least in the range of the difference between Intel and AMD performance in laptops. So you're looking at CPUs with 4 Willow Cove cores. It's a new microarchitecture. So, again, we're left in the cold on the desktop. This is the second new microarchitecture they have released for laptops and not giving us anything on the desktop. But the Willow Cove cores are, they're a lot better. They have more cache. There's some, some fine grained changes there. The faster mesh. It's actually a double ring, or it's not a mesh, excuse me, a double ring bus. And they come in dual and quad core models. What's really interesting is Intel claims that its quad core models beat the Ryzen 4000 series chips that have 8 cores. So that's pretty impressive. And you wonder how did they get there? Well, the big way that they did that was just through higher frequencies. And you're looking at anywhere from 750 megahertz to, it's like 500 to 750 megahertz faster over the previous gen Ice Lake chips, and that's at base and at boost clocks. And also they have some really high all-core boost clocks. For instance, one of their chips boosts up to 4.2 on all cores, and supposedly can sustain that. That's a higher boost than any Ryzen laptop chip has on one core. So that's how they're able to make up that gap. And they've got the new 10 nanometer SuperFin process, which is by all rights impressive. They've made a lot of changes to boost clock speeds, and they literally baked a bigger capacitor into the silicon, and what that does is it keeps voltages constant. So when you start running at higher clocks, you get V droop, the voltage drops, and that makes it hard for them to sustain that. So now they have a Superman capacitor, in the layers of the chip itself that helps keep those voltages constant. So it's pretty impressive on the frequency side. And not only that, how long they can sustain those. And then, you've got some other big things. The chips support DDR5, LPDDR5 specifically. Now, at first, you'll only see DDR4 in laptops, LPDDR4 in laptops, but a lot of that is just because of cost. DDR5 is still relatively new, well, very new. So it's expensive, and the OEMs aren't really willing to bite, take that hit to the wallet quite yet. They aren't sure if the market can absorb those costs. And it takes a lot more engineering, things like trace routing, blah, blah, blah. And it takes more power. So for now, you get LPDDR4, but you will see LPDDR5 in the future. One other thing is Intel is now the first with PCIe 4.0 for laptops. Now, AMD had PCIe 4.0 first on desktops, but the Ryzen 4000 series is still on PCIe 3.0 for laptops and notebooks, etc. So Intel now they're the first to PCIe 4.0. So we'll probably see a lot more interest in PCIe 4.0 SSDs and things like that. So.
Pretty cool. Max, we were talking before. I know you had your eyes on this announcement as well. What are your thoughts on Tiger Lake? And do you have any thoughts on how this might compete against Ryzen 4000 at all?
Yes, well, they did, I think, a great job by raising the memory, since the GPU is tied to the memory. Now they have like 4020 something gigahertz on the memory, right? So with the new GPU, integrated GPU, and the memory speed, I think they made a pretty nice thing. So I think as well, mobile is there are people that games actually with the integrated graphics card. So if they want to compete against AMD, this is, I think, is a nice choice. Pushing the memory, making high clocks the CPU. So I think they are in the right direction. Maybe Intel that sit down a bit, and AMD took over some technologies, some advantages. But Intel is making mobile since in the past 2 decades. So I think they are keeping up the pace, and I'm really keen to see the performance of the integrated GPU, especially with if they can make a laptop with high memory speed. So.
Yeah, that is one thing. There's so many new things about this chip. I wish we could say the same about the desktop chips when they come, but I did forget to mention the Xe LP graphics are twice as fast as the Gen 11 graphics, which are even faster than the integrated graphics that we see on desktop chips. So compared to where the integrated graphics are on desktop PC to laptops now miles ahead in terms of performance. And they say, it's twice as powerful, which results in less power. And they're really raising the bar where you don't need a discrete GPU, something like an NVIDIA GPU anymore.
Less consumption. So it's a good thing, since I think Intel is pretty nice with the efficiency. So even if they can clock higher, they can maintain a good balance between, I think, all the chipset. I remember like the Centrino many years ago. Intel is always looking to maximize the performance, the power consumption as well. So I think this one will be an interesting architecture to see, to test, and to see the difference against the competitor.
Well, when it comes to power consumption, they made a lot of really fine-grained changes that are really going to help power consumption. You're going to get a lot more performance at a lot lower power. So, for instance, they made it now to where the PCIe, that block and all of the fabrics associated with it and the lanes can clock up and down and adjust dynamically based upon how busy they are. That's going to help a lot with power. They did the same thing with the memory bus, and also all of the different components on the chip can now be dynamically adjusted for clocks, and that's going to make a huge difference. You'll save power in all kinds of places pretty much all the time. Now, one benchmark that Intel shared that was pretty surprising to me, and I really want to see if this plays out in the real world, is, as we know, when you unplug a laptop, performance goes down. So they ran some tests with the Ryzen chip, the 4800U, I believe, off the top of my head. And they plotted the frequency when it's plugged in, and of course, it's fairly high and whatnot. But when they unplug it, the frequency goes way down. Now with with Tiger Lake, there was almost no difference. So that'll be pretty impressive to see if maybe that's just one notebook that's set up like that, or do they have some special power plan they're running that, you can turn on or off, how that impacts battery life. But yeah, power looks like it'll be good, and performance.
Yeah, sometimes if you save something here, something there, at the end you will save a lot. So I think they know what they are doing, so they have a lot of decades of experience. So
yeah, and like with PCIe 4.0, it takes a lot more power, and well, not a lot more. It depends upon how they implement it. And that was one thing that AMD said with Ryzen 4000. That's why they didn't bring it into their laptop models, is because of power. But if you're moving a certain block of data or twice as much data within the same amount of time, if you can clock down immediately, then you come out ahead on power. You're more efficient.
Yeah.
And you can do more with fewer lanes.
Oh, yes. Some nice things.
So kind of pretty relevant question. Peter Lowe is asking what we know in terms of what this might mean for battery life and in terms of overall laptop designs, and what kind of details are we likely going to see?
Peter, I know Peter very well. Hi, Peter. Peter from Micron. That's going to depend. Intel hasn't really shared anything, and as always, laptop battery, statistics that they share with you are almost, when you actually test them, it's a whole lot different. It depends on what you're doing. We're not real sure how it's going to shake out. I would assume, and it's a big assumption, that you're going to see a pretty big improvement. I mean, you're getting more performance at every single power level, or you can clock down to a lower power level and get the same amount of performance as previous gen chips. So with all of the things that they built in there to minimize power consumption, there's absolutely going to be a tangible increase. What that equates to is hard to say right now. So, our guys get it in there and test it. So we get Andrew working on them.
He'll be working hard. And by the way, Peter says he's no longer at Micron. So
I know that.
Pounding at his door asking for Micron secrets, GDRs, stuff. Okay, great. So like I said, it's been a busy week. There's been so much news. Another big thing that's been in the news this week is 360 hertz monitors, which, we've been watching this space ever since January when Asus showed off a 360 hertz monitor at CES. But this week we actually got some more final confirmation on what we can expect from these high refresh rate monitors. So we now know that they'll be coming out in this fall. MSI's 360 hertz monitor is confirmed for November at $799. Asus's is coming out this month for $699. And we also know that they all are seemingly using the same panel, which isn't a big surprise. So I mentioned 360 hertz monitors from MSI and Asus, right? So Acer and Alienware have some coming too. They should all be IPS panels, which typically have good viewing angles. So if you're going to be viewing the screen from the side or even sharing it, IPS should do better than other panel types. IPS is also known for having strong colors. Not everyone has shared specs, but Asus is claiming that their monitor will have 99% sRGB coverage. So that's, you would suspect that the other ones will be at the same color coverage. So that's pretty high. Obviously 99 is almost 100%, so pretty good. Another big thing we learned about these monitors this week is that they will be coming out with a tool that NVIDIA announced just this week, NVIDIA's Reflex Latency Analyzer. So that'll be available to NVIDIA graphics card users via a driver in September, but it's going to be built into these monitors out of the box. So according to NVIDIA, this tool is supposed to optimize the rendering pipeline across your computer's CPU and graphics card, with the end result being up to a 50% reduction in latency. With the monitors, you'll have this tool integrated, like I said, so you'll be able to monitor latency on the screen's OSD, its on-screen display or menu. So that's peripheral PC and display latency you'll be able to see. So I'm very curious to hear what you guys think about NVIDIA's new tool that's claiming to help you cut latency by 50% up to.
Does it require silicon like G-Sync? Does it need like another chip inside of the monitor rack?
I don't believe so. So because they're giving it out via drivers, and they say you need just an NVIDIA graphics card.
I mean, I think it'll be interesting. AMD has this anti-lag feature that they instituted, and I've had tons of problems with that. I mean, if you try to game at 720p, which I know, come on, who does that? But a lot of people actually, if you test low-end chips and you're testing integrated graphics, that's what you got to do. But whenever I turn that on with 720p, I have tons of problems. But I think it's a good thing they're reducing latency. How much perceivable impact it will have, I guess that matters. It's subjective.
Yeah, maybe pro gamers, they are going to enjoy that since they are really super fast or something that I'm not anymore, I don't think so, but there are people that really can tell the difference from a 240 Hz display to 144. So maybe for that kind of target of people, maybe they will enjoy this new feature, since I heard that was like that you plug the mouse inside the monitor so it can tune itself or something like this. Maybe
it's interesting. ASUS, they had a press event this week, and they mentioned needing a certified mouse to use it with the monitors. I haven't gotten much information outside of that, but I don't know what the certified mice will be, if they're mice that are already in existence that'll work.
And I mean, the reason why I'm asking if it's going to need silicon, and it kind of does, if you have to plug, it sounds like it, if you have to plug the mouse into the monitor, is how much uptake will it get? You look at G-Sync, and you have to have G-Sync certified monitors. They eventually kind of backtrack on that. I'm just kind of curious as to how widely that'll be adopted. But
yeah, I was wondering if either of you might have any idea on how something like that would work. So if they're giving it to users via a driver, do you have any idea on how that would technically work? How that's going to cut my latency in half?
I couldn't tell you, honestly.
You'd be making the big bucks if you could tell me, huh, Paul?
Yeah.
Some kind of sorcery.
So, like I said, guys, we're still taking questions. So if you have any questions for our guests, put them into the chat, and I'll try to get to them. I did want to ask Max one of my own questions, because we're talking about 360 hertz monitors. And obviously, you're going to be wanting to hit 360 frames per second to get the most out of these displays. Have you gotten to that level before? Have you done any graphics overclocking as well?
Yeah, I do graphics overclocking, but maybe for benchmark. I'm starting now. I think I want to do some show with gameplay with a highly overclocked card. So I'm going to probably the new NVIDIA card. I'm going to do liquid nitrogen on both CPU and GPU. So maybe I will try to break some FPS record. But 360, I think is a lot for for a daily driver. So probably they can achieve that in Counter-Strike. I don't think it's even possible to do it like in Fortnite or some kind of game. So it's kind of ambitious to have that new level of performance, because if 144 or even 240 was some kind of achievable, I think it's not that easy to max out a monitor like that and fully enjoy that experience. Otherwise, you want to bring down all the detail, but you gain something on the speed, but you lose in graphics quality. So I don't know if how many people will pursue that road. So I'm curious about the technology, since I think it's very niche. I don't know what you think, guys, but 360 is a lot.
We've seen it in action at CES. I was actually with Sharon when she shot a video of it. I mean, some of the things they're pointing out to kind of sell you on it is, when the screen is moving real fast, the text is clear and little details like that. But I mean, personally, I have no need for, 240 is good for me. I think that the amount, the cost associated with making that jump, that's going to be, pretty minute, like you said, for most people. I don't think it's,
So practical, settling for 240 hertz. Look at you.
I know. Especially if I have to buy it, right? Yeah,
the graphics card must be really big. I mean, maybe the 390.
Maybe the 3090. I mean, that's a massive card, right?
I wanted Max to overclock like a 1080 Ti for me, and let me do it like that.
Well, we can do that. We have a 20 Ti here. So
yeah.
Very cool. So we have a question. This is probably a good question for Paul. Do you know if we will ever see desktop Tiger Lake CPUs?
No. Well,
We'll never see him, or no, you don't.
No. We should. We're not anticipating seeing it. So you look at laptops are now on the second generation of 10 nanometer, but you will not see 10 nanometer on the desktop until Alder Lake arrives. So Alder Lake is going to have both a series of fast and then a series of slower cores, just like ARM Big Little. And I mean, this is like a massive risk for Intel. They've confirmed it, that it's going to be a hybrid chip, because it's going to change everything. Now, for the better or worse is anybody's guess. But, in order to compete with AMD on core counts, what they're going to do is have like 8 fast cores. Right now, everything points to them having a maximum of 8 fast cores. And then, maybe 8 more, or X number of slow cores that they will add to that. But the net is that, that won't be Tiger Lake per se. It's going to be completely different than anything we've seen now. What they use for the core is probably up for debate. But yeah, you definitely won't see a one-to-one comparison. I mean, we're going to have to suffer through 14 nanometer again with Rocket Lake. Rocket Lake comes at we think, the end of the year or the beginning of the year. But I mean, with Intel, that's anybody's guess. But it's another generation of 14 nanometer before we even get to Alder Lake, which that's the first 10 nanometer, and that's 2 jumps ahead. So we'll be waiting a while. And Rocket Lake will be the same as what you already see on the desktop.
Very cool. Well, I joked a bit about overclocking my graphics card to hit 360 frames per second. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the CPU, because the Reflex, NVIDIA's Reflex tool talks about, working with both the CPU and GPU. I was hoping, Paul, can you just talk a little bit about how important the CPU is in terms of gaming frame rates, and how your frame rates might change depending on, how well your CPU will perform depending on if you have a higher end or more entry level graphics card. So can I buy a higher level chip and get better frame rates even though I have a lower end graphics card?
Well, that depends. I mean, you're gonna reach a point to where basically what you're doing is you're balancing your bottleneck. If you have a really slow chip paired with like a mid-range card, then you're not fully using that GPU. And vice versa, if you have a really big chip and you're using a very low-end GPU, then you're just fully saturating it. So where is the bottleneck? Is it the CPU or is it the GPU? I mean, that depends. Some of it varies based upon title, but one thing is per core performance, which is a lot of times frequency. Mixture of frequency and IPC if you want to be technical, but frequency. The faster your cores are in most games still pays off. I mean, we've had this big expansion of cores over the years, but the overwhelming majority of games still respond best to a speedy chip. So it's all about finding that balance. Our GPU guy did a pretty detailed breakdown of some of the previous gen chips. Now I know he has the new chips in now, so he might update it with that. But I mean, that whole ball game is going to change with NVIDIA's new cards. 3070 is supposed to be as fast as a 2080 Ti. So the bar just went up a lot, because then you have 3080 and 3090 above that. You're going to need a fast CPU for these cards. And, they are PCIe 4.0, and AMD is the only PCIe 4.0 platform, but I don't believe that's going to make them better for gaming until, maybe Zen 3, but right now, like the 10900K and some of these other Intel chips, even the 10700K and 10600K are fast. And, you pair them with those, regardless of PCIe 4.0, they'll be
This is
fast.
something I would like to ask you, Paul, since it's been like a couple of days that I have one of my subscribers that I was engaging in conversation, and he was afraid that he have an Intel, and a 10th generation i7, so he have a very nice build, but he's afraid to won't be able to use the PCIe Express Gen 4 because he want a build to last 5 years. So it doesn't can make his mind to did I sell this now and I buy an AMD to have Gen 4 for the last 5 years, or do I keep with Intel and Gen 3? So what do you think is going to last the Gen 3 at least? Is going to make it until the next 4000 series?
That's such a loaded question. I mean, it depends upon how fast they learn to take advantage of the interface. So the big problem here is the games just simply aren't coded to take advantage of that fast interface. So with PCIe 3, switching to PCIe 4 on a PCIe 4 card, you see very little gain. And that's just because games aren't, they don't take advantage of it. It's not, the software isn't coded in a way to where it actually requests that much data across that bus at any given time. Now, they are bringing the storage, I believe it's called Direct IO, the same thing that they're using in the Xbox to the PC. They announced that as part of the NVIDIA thing. Now that will be big because what they're doing is they're utilizing these queues from NVMe, and they're, instead of using one queue, they're using multiple. So basically they're going to ask for a whole ton of data at once, and then you'll get it and you'll see an advantage of that speed. But games, again, have to be coded for it. And as we've seen, industry adoption on those kind of things can be slow. I mean, look how long it's been since, 3 years or something, since AMD come along with 8-core CPUs and upset everything. And we still see a lot of games that don't scale well. It just takes a long time, unfortunately, years. He may get some legs out of it. I mean, if anything, I'd wait for Zen 3 and see what's going to happen there.
Because today I did a test for him. I put my 2080 Ti, this i9, and I try, the Tomb Raider at 4K, DLSR, so everything maxed out. With Gen 2 and Gen 3, there was no difference at all. So
exactly.
Gen 3 is actually, Gen 2 is actually good for a 2080 Ti. I adapted that like a 4090 Ti, so the next generation can saturate the PCIe with Gen 3.
Yeah, yeah, and that's been a thing. I've seen so many websites do that. They'll test 2.0 versus 3.0, and we're still not fully utilizing 3.0. I think, of course, there's always going to be that exception. But it just boils down to the software. And they are finally realizing that. That's the thing with I believe it's Direct IO. I'm sure I'm wrong, the name. But the theory behind what Microsoft is doing there is, to allow the games to just communicate more effectively. But it doesn't matter if you've got an 8-lane highway and you're only asking for data across one lane. So I think it's going to be a long time before it'll make a big difference. Now, if you're doing like productivity applications, or you're using like heterogeneous compute, GPU, it'll make a difference there today in some things.
The storage,
for gaming, no.
For the storage, yes, it may be an interesting difference if you do a lot of storage intense application. That I agree with that. But gaming, I don't think so. It will be a thing for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll at least 3.
Not a need. Maybe if you want to, but the need to move to 4Gen to be bottlenecked, I don't think so in the next years. So I think we can agree on that.
I like agreeing on this show. A little harmony. So we have another viewer question, also about Tiger Lake, mobile Tiger Lake, the Tiger Lake that was just announced. Paul, do you think we'll see any 6-core or 8-core SKUs?
I sure hope so. Right now, Intel's topping out at 28 watts. They'll need something, especially when Zen 3 comes. Zen 3 is coming, and it's going to be a big jump forward. And AMD is not stopping. So Intel is so far behind in this product cadence. Ryzen 4000 has already been out there a while, so you're going to see Ryzen 5000. With Zen 3, they're going to need something to counter that, and they're going to absolutely have to have at least a 6-core model. I'd bet a lot of money on it. They just have to do it. Now, during the briefings yesterday, a big thing with the first 10 nanometer chips is Ice Lake is they didn't have high core counts, and that's because Intel couldn't fab them, right? When they were making bigger chips, they're getting too many defects, so they couldn't make them. Literally could not make anything bigger than a quad core. Go figure. But they asked, so Intel they were using Ice Lake and then Comet Lake with 14 nanometers. So someone asked, are all of the future laptop chips going to be 10 nanometer? And they said, yes, everything from here forward is 10 nanometer super thin. So that, in my mind, also answers that question. Yeah, they'll have a bigger one coming. But when?
Well, Paul, we'll have to keep reading all your great articles, and I'm sure you'll be the first one to tell me when it's coming out. So definitely something to keep our eyes peeled for. I mean, the demand from the OEMs has got to be there. So
It is. So they have, 50 designs will ship this holiday season. They expect over 150 devices, in time. And they have their Evo, which is second gen Project Athena, is moving along nicely. A lot more. They're getting a lot more buy-in from OEMs there. When you see OEMs buying in like that, I mean, when they have to design around these chips, this is a long process, right? And it takes a lot of co-engineering and a lot of money. They're not going to buy into a platform, and you won't see that many platforms if they're not impressed with what they're seeing. So, it's going to be it's going to get real interesting. But as always, you have to wait till you see the chips. So
Get that sweet silicone in your hands.
that's right. Yes. Or Andrew's hands are a tough guy, but
Whoever.
he'll give us the skin. But I mean, I expect that I expect they'll live up to the billing, and a lot of that is just basically based upon the fact that the industry is buying into it. They get the chips, they know. So.
Awesome. Well, I hate to say it, but that is about all the time we have for this week's show. But before we wrap up, of course, I want to thank Paul for stopping by, sharing his knowledge with us. Also, I want to thank, of course, our special guest, Max, aka Hardware Numbers. Max, for anyone who wants to follow your awesome overclocking work, your amazing Ice Dragon, where can they find you?
Well, YouTube or my Discord server. Usually you can go on my YouTube channel, you hit a video, you find my Discord, Facebook, everything. And as well, I suggest you to check out Italian Extreme Modders on Facebook. My team, they do a lot of stuff. So I'm mainly the overclocker, they are the modders. So, but they do really amazing jobs with liquid cooling, really customized things. So check it out. It's really well worth it.
Very cool. And
I'll
that's
check it out.
Yeah.
Paul's gonna check it out. Awesome.
Yeah. Do you guys do a lot of custom water cooling loops and stuff like that?
Yeah. Recently,
yeah.
a mod for the contest, for the Cyberpunk, the contest. So you will find a really lot of amazing stuff. The guys are absolutely great. Well, they made the Dragon, so they know what they're doing.
Excellent. I'll check it out.
Very cool. And that's Hardware Numbers. The E in numbers is a 3, right? So don't mess that up. You'll be able to find Max. So yeah, thank you to our awesome guests for joining us. Of course, thank you to our viewers for tuning in. The Tom's Hardware Show is live every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, you can stay caught up by subscribing to our YouTube channel or liking us on Facebook. And if you prefer your fun in audio form, you can also download the show as a podcast. All right, so that is our show for today. We will see you all next Thursday.